Chapter 7 Sex, Drugs and Liberty The Case Against Government Bans by John Meadowcroft.
Imagine you are sitting down to dinner one evening. You open a bottle of wine when there is a knock at the door. You open the door to find your neighbors standing outside. They tell you that they have decided that you must no longer drink alcohol. They confiscate your wine and tell you that if you drink again, they will fine you and perhaps even imprison you. Most people would consider such behavior outrageous. What right do our neighbors have to tell us that we cannot drink alcohol? But this is exactly what happens when governments ban things, whether alcohol, tobacco, or other drugs, or prostitution, gambling, or boxing, things that are all banned in some countries. Some people may say that bans by governments are reasonable if they result from a democratic vote, but such a vote is really nothing more than people's neighbors telling them what they can and cannot do, just like in the example above. Laws banning things are widespread. All over the world, governments try to stop people from doing things that they want to do, even when those things do not harm other people. This chapter asks whether it is right that governments ban things and look at the consequences that follow when governments introduce bans.
The harm principle.
It is usually claimed that things should be banned in order to prevent harm, either to other people or to the person undertaking the activity to be banned. So, for example, drugs like cannabis, ecstasy and cocaine are banned in most countries to prevent harm to users and other people. Boxing is banned in some countries to prevent harm to fighters, and alcohol was banned in the United States from 1920 to 1933 to prevent drinkers and others being harmed by the perceived evil of alcohol. Banning to prevent self-harm breaks what is known as the harm principle. The idea of the harm principle comes from the liberal philosopher John Stuart Mill's essay On Liberty, written in 1859. Mill argued that in a free society, people should have the freedom to do whatever they want as long as they do not harm other people, even if that means they sometimes harm themselves. This means that if someone wishes to take cannabis or alcohol, for example, we cannot physically stop them. To physically stop someone from doing what they want to do implies that we know what is best for them better than they themselves do. The problem is that anything could be banned by following this line of argument. Smoking cigarettes, eating fatty food, or spending large amounts of time playing video games could all be banned to prevent people from doing things that other people think are self-harming. If we try to physically stop people from doing things that we think are self-harming, then very soon we will no longer live in a free society. Instead, we will live in a society where many things are banned or restricted by government. This would be a rigid and regimented society that would not be much fun to live in.
The consequences of banning.
Not only does banning lead to the creation of an unfree society where very few things are permitted, banning also produces lots of negative consequences.
Banning places markets into the hands of criminals.
Wherever things are banned, criminal organizations will try to profit by providing them illegally. Banning drives a wedge between the cost of production and the final selling price, ensuring that people prepared to take the risks involved in supplying illegal goods and services can make exceptional profits. The US prohibition of alcohol, for example, enabled criminal gangs to make huge sums of money supplying alcohol and illegal drinking premises. As a result, many criminals such as the gangster Al Capone became very rich during this time. After alcohol prohibition was repealed in 1933, organized criminals turned to the supply of the remaining illegal drugs, particularly cocaine, where once again huge fortunes were to be made. In 1989, Forbes magazine listed the Colombian drug baron Pablo Escobar as the seventh wealthiest man in the world. They estimated that his Medellin drug cartel had an annual income of $80 billion.
Banning increases the risk of already risky activities.
By shifting the supply of banned goods and services to the black market, banning increases the risk of already risky activities. For example, the criminalization of drug users contributed to the spread of HIV and AIDS. Users reused dirty needles as clean needles were difficult to obtain without drawing attention to oneself as an illegal drug user. Moreover, banning drugs like cocaine and heroin increases the dangers of drug use because users must buy drugs without knowing their purity or precise contents, which can lead to overdoses and poisonings.
Banning criminalizes people who would not otherwise be criminals.
Banning involves the creation of what are called consensual crimes. Crimes where there are no real victims because everyone engaging in the criminal activity wants to be involved. This criminalizes people who would otherwise be law-abiding. For example, if alcohol was banned tomorrow, anyone who wanted to keep their wine cellar stocked or tried to hide a bottle of beer at the back of the fridge would automatically become a criminal. The impact of the criminalization of otherwise law-abiding people can be seen in the thousands of people currently in American prisons solely for non-violent drug-related crimes. Many of these convicts are young people whose prospects of a straight career are badly damaged because they have been in prison.
Banning diverts law enforcement resources away from conduct that harms other people.
The enforcement of any ban is costly. The detection, arrest, prosecution, and punishment of people who engage in illegal activities costs money. In 2006, for example, the annual budget of the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration was $2.4 billion. Bans mean that government is bigger than it would otherwise be, and taxes are higher than they would otherwise be. Banning also imposes opportunity costs on society. The costs of the goods and services that could have been produced if the money used to enforce the bans had been spent on other things. As a result of the banning of many drugs, for example, a large proportion of the money that is currently spent on law enforcement goes to prevent and punish consensual crimes. This is an opportunity cost because the money could have been spent preventing crimes with real victims, such as murder or burglary.
Banning increases public ignorance.
Some people say bans are needed because many people do not fully understand the likely consequences of their actions. But this argument is flawed because by their very nature, bans increase public ignorance. Where boxing is illegal, for example, people who continue to fight outside the law will be even less likely to get reliable information about the risks of boxing.
Banning almost never works and is almost always counterproductive.
The costs outlined above may be considered worthwhile if bans worked, but the evidence suggests that bans rarely work and are usually counterproductive. The banning of recreational drugs is a good example. In the US, cannabis has been illegal since 1937. In Holland, it has been tolerated since 1970, and today it may be freely bought from licensed coffee shops. In 1997, 33% of the US population aged 12 years and over had used cannabis in their lifetime. In Holland, by contrast, only 16% of the people aged 12 years or over had used cannabis in their lifetime. Although the difference is less marked when older age groups are analyzed, the evidence shows that cannabis use is greater in the US than in Holland. Banning handguns and other firearms has been similarly ineffective in combating violent crime. For example, the Republic of Ireland banned firearms in 1971, a year in which there were 10 murders in that country. Since 1995, there have never been less than 38 murders per year, and in 2005, there were a total of 54 murders. In Jamaica, guns were banned in 1974 when the country's murder rate was 10 per 100,000 people every year. Since then, the murder rate has continued to rise, not falling below 31 per 100,000 people per year since 1995. There is no evidence that gun control reduces violent crime. Rather, it ensures that only criminals will possess guns. There are a number of reasons why bans and controls almost always fail. One reason is that people will try to find a way around them. High taxes on tobacco lead to cigarette smuggling and counterfeiting. Banning drugs leads to vast networks of illegal supply. The outlawing of prostitution leads to the provision of massage and escort services. Just because government passes legislation to ban something, it does not necessarily follow that it will cease. Also, for a ban to be successfully enforced requires a level of government spending and interference in people's lives that is unacceptable in a free society. The war on drugs costs the US government billions of dollars every year and has seen thousands of US citizens imprisoned, yet drugs continue to be widely available. It is hard to imagine the price that would have to be paid in order to make a significant impact on the supply of illegal drugs in America. Bans also fail because they address the symptoms rather than the causes of social problems. For example, gun control is not a solution to violent crime. Violent criminals are perfectly capable of illegally acquiring guns or finding other ways to maim and kill people, such as using knives. To reduce violent crime demands a much cleverer approach than just trying to stop criminals from using one type of weapon. It is also the case that bans often seem to promote the very behavior that they are supposed to stop. For example, one American study found that measures to stop teenage smoking by restricting the sale of cigarettes to young people had exactly the opposite effect. In towns where more restrictions on the sale of cigarettes were introduced, teenage smoking rose compared to towns where no new measures were introduced. Similar results have been found for controls designed to reduce teenage drinking and to reduce car accidents by lowering speed limits. Exactly why bans should have this opposite effect is not entirely clear. It is probably related to the forbidden fruit effect, whereby activities that are forbidden become more attractive, especially to young people.
Liberty and personal responsibility.
The evidence supports the view that all actions that do not harm other people should be legal. This does not necessarily mean that we approve of activities like drug use or prostitution. Rather, it means that we believe that what people do should be a matter of personal choice as long as they do not harm other people. It is possible to believe that people should not do something and to believe that that activity should be legal. It simply means that we believe that where people's actions do not harm other people, they should make their own moral choices. A free society based upon the principles of liberty is one in which other people cannot decide whether we drink alcohol, smoke tobacco, or consume other drugs, or engage in prostitution, gambling, or boxing. Equally, it means that we cannot decide for other people. It is a matter for each individual to make his own choices. We may find that when people are given responsibility, they act responsibly. That is the basis of a free society.